Welcome to Millionaire Smarts. This is your host, Lee Miltier. And if you're new to me, I am a performance and productivity and mindset coach. Now, the Millionaire Smarts program was literally created in 2003. And I have had the opportunity to interview some of the best thought leaders who are entrepreneurial in the world. And we're going to continue with that today. Our goal with Millionaire Smarts Thought Leaders interviews is to literally assist you with skills to use with the challenging world that we live in, literally. As self-employed business owners, we must always be aware that our mindset, our behaviors determine our success or failure in our life. We have to be an artist and a scientist when listening to new data and information. So open up your mind that you taking the time to make some small adjustments to your own mindset will effectively upgrade your abilities and your prosperity. So mold and shape this material into your own personality and your own professional needs, because our focus this month is a super important topic that most of us don't get enough information on. And we're going to discuss the topic of conflict resolution. So we can diffuse conflict effectively without physical engagement or lasting negative feelings, both in our business and professional life. And I highly recommend that you not only listen to this insightful interview, you also read the transcripts and reports, because we're going to get 4 small reports from the book that you'll be able to utilize, plus a copy of the book. So again, our esteemed author and expert is Grandmaster Art Mason. You may have heard of him. He is globally recognized as a martial arts instructor, over 40 years of experience dedicated to the art of personal development. He is literally hailing from Canada, but has currently just moved and is residing in Romania in Europe. And he is a martial artist specializing in the powerful art of pressure point self-defense. His teachings literally transcend physical techniques, and they emphasize on focus, discipline, and personal growth. He is renowned for his innovative approach of teaching martial arts conflict resolution by combining deep understanding of the martial arts philosophy and practical strategies. And he's the author of No Body Contact, Pressure Point of Conflict Resolution, brand new book, an insightful ebook, by the way, that you can print out, that will empower individuals to diffuse all kinds of conflict effectively without getting to any kind of physical engagement. He's the founder of an extensive online martial arts educational platform. He has created a robust library of video courses and ebooks, literally designed to make martial arts accessible to all of the students worldwide. He has a very unique approach that blends traditional martial arts wisdom, modern principles, and he appeals to everybody, to children, women, seniors, and all kinds of professionals in the world who want more self-development. He is dedicated. In 2024, he launched a very special thing that's dear to his heart, a dog rescue initiative in Romania. And this clearly reflects his commitment to compassion and service. And his true mission is to inspire and empower individuals like us through the timeless principles of martial arts and using conflict resolution. So I'm thrilled to let you know that our expert guest is Art Mason, and he has again given our members permission to download a free copy of his book, which I just finished reading. And I learned a new set of skills that I literally realized our entire educational system should be giving to people. So we want to reduce our conflict as business owners, and it should be one of our top objectives to knowing how that we can create more peace and harmony, reduce our stress with our staff, customers and clients, and people in general. So with all that said, I would like to now welcome Master Art Mason. Well, welcome, Art. It's so wonderful to see you.
Thank you, Lee. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Well, we're very delighted to have you. So, we're going to talk about conflict resolution. And so, the first question I really would like to ask you is tell us about the experience that you have that enabled you to write this particular book.
Well, it started because I worked at Chrysler for 20 years. I worked on an assembly line making minivans, and everybody in North America knows the minivan. And I also built big vans. I started that job when I was 24, the same time as when I got into the martial arts. And a lot of people have worked in factories, but until you work in an assembly plant where every moment of your day is rigidly controlled, you haven't worked in a factory yet. And it is a completely adversarial uh, place. Completely, you have nose to nose arguments with supervision on a day to day basis. And of course, there is always the overlying threat that it will turn bad. And I was at that time, being that I was young, I was very pro union. Not that I'm anti union now, but I was very pro union, and I was one of the dissidents in the company. In fact, when I left, they had a party.
Come on, really?
However, yeah, they had a pizza party when I left. And I
Wow.
know that because I ran into one of my old bosses and he told me that. But what happened in my last year, 15 months to a year that I was there, because my seniority was high, I got a job in which I was stuck between union and management. I was still a union member, but I had to work with both sides directly. And it was life altering because I discovered that the people in management were also human, even though we didn't really view them that way. So it was one of the great learning experiences, being in the middle and negotiating to try to keep the peace in the area in which I was basically governing.
And I'm assuming there
And
was
so
no
you
training for you for this.
know, they just threw me in. Well, welcome to the area. This is your job now. And it changed my view completely on really the world because I saw both sides, and most people only ever see one side of something. And I had to see both sides. And it changed all of my life skills, took a lot of the cockiness out of it. And I did the job well. I took a buyout when they closed that plant down so that I could be full time as a teacher doing the martial arts thing, which is what I wanted. But that was quite a journey.
Well, that's very fascinating. When I was in high school, I was on the debate team, and that was great training for me. And I had no idea at the time that going in one day, I was going to be on one side, and I would debate, all the why we should do this, and then the next day, I would have to be on the other side debating, against myself, and that was probably one of the most profound lessons that I learned in school is that there are two sides to everything and that I need to be extremely open-minded about that. And you just mentioned about you wanted to start full-time teaching. So tell us about your credentials, which are very impressive.
Well, I started a little over 40 years ago now in a hybrid Korean martial art, Hapkido and Taekwondo, more Hapkido than Taekwondo. But I was part of a movement that started in the 70s, in which the Korean masters had come to Ontario, Canada, and had started to spread the teachings. So I kind of got caught up in that wave. I spent 16 years with my first teacher from 84 to 2000. And then I went out on my own. And when I was at Chrysler, because I was at Chrysler till 2003, I was basically working around the clock. I got in a steady day shift because I had the years and I was, going from one place to the other. Um, I've studied many different martial arts because I've been very privileged to, and also been willing to donate the time. My rank in what they what most martial artists would call my root art, which is Hapkido, is ninth degree or ninth Dan black belt. And then I have a fifth degree in Taekwondo, a sixth degree in the pressure point art of Kyusho Jitsu, and then a third degree, oddly enough, the lowest of my ranks, in an art called Kosho-ryu. But that is what I now consider to be my root art because I've studied it the longest. But I never bothered to pursue rank in it because it just kind of becomes arbitrary after a while. You know, it in the past it means something to you, and the longer you're there around, the less it means to you. The more you just want the knowledge rather than the kudos. So that's basically it in a nutshell. There's other things I did as well, but I never pursued rank in them.
So, a few years ago, I went to Japan and spent about a month in Japan giving seminars, and I really became very interested in the samurai philosophy, so to speak. And I educated myself as much as possible because not only was I speaking to the Japanese audience, but it just fascinated me in general. And the thing that fascinated me the most, and I'm going to connect this to you, was the fact that as the samurai trained, they were trained not to fight first, but to actually try to have, conflict resolution. Not that they use those words exactly. So when I first saw your book, it says no body contact, pressure points of conflict resolution. I originally thought, well, why would I be interested in that? I'm not a martial artist, not officially anyway. And I'm too little to, have body contact with most people. But when I read your book, the majority of your book is really about mental techniques. And I noticed that it would really be good for a lot of our people. We have a huge amount of lawyers. We have CPAs, CPA lawyers. We have martial artists. We have people in the marketing business. We have physicians. But the one thing in common with all of these people is that there's conflict with their staff, with their customers, with their, clients, with, their neighbors, their family. I mean, we're living in this world of, and as you and I were talking about booking this, you brought up to me the fact that we're living in a world where people being offended is just over the top, and that you've got to learn to deal with it. It's not like it's going to go away tomorrow. So let's just jump right in. And I know you had an experience, and you talk about it in your book, about a neighbor that you had a situation with, that you realized how crucial it was that, a lot of people can understand to use these skills. So would you like to share that with us?
Yeah, certainly. When I moved to the city that we're in now about a year ago here in Romania, um, people in Romania, while they are very, very kind and welcoming, also have their guard up currently because of the immigration statuses in Europe. Now, Romania has not really participated the same as West Europe has, but people are cautious. They're a little bit concerned when somebody new walks into their town. And I mean, let's face it, I'm funky looking. I stand out in the crowd. So it's hard to miss me. One Sunday afternoon, I hear some noise outside and I look out the window, and the neighbor is securing a fence against the opening between our two yards. So my front door, basically, and the driveway that is his. And he's got a big piece of wrought iron fence, beautiful fencing, and he's securing this in here. So I take a picture of it and I contact my landlord. Now, this gentleman, older gentleman in a generational family, which you see here all the time, he's the grandfather, his son and his wife are there, and their two children are there. And the girls are almost adults themselves. I take a picture down of this and I send it to my landlord, because there's only one person in that family who speaks any English. I don't see him. And while I do speak Romanian, when somebody's yelling at you, it's hard to understand them. I need the slowness of the conversation to pick up the words still. So she calls them and she tells me, well, the reason he is doing this, and I told him he has to take it down, is because you're not locking the front gate, and a gypsy came into the yard, and that scared him and the family tremendously. Now, I got to qualify that term gypsy. They call themselves gypsies too, so it is not a racist term. Only in modern time would I have to say something like that, but I will say it. What they essentially are is they are people who've been in Europe for centuries, who came from India and crossed the Mediterranean out of Egypt, and that's how they got called gypsies, as everybody thought they were Egyptian. And they're good people, but there are some of them that are predatory, and especially you will hear that in Europe all the time about problems with stealing and stuff like that. So I had said, I went up to the fence and the son was there, and I called him over and he said, don't worry, we're taking the fence down. And I said to him, I said, why didn't you knock on my door and tell me that we had a problem? He's going, I didn't think you'd care. So of course I care. I don't want to see things stolen from the yard. So this is a very peaceful town. So, well, what happens is they check the doors, and if the door will open, they'll come back at night and they'll steal stuff out of the yard. Like, no problem. We'll lock the door all the time. I've got to fix the lock. So his dad fixed the lock for me, and now we're good friends, actually. You get greeted every time. There's always handshakes, but it was just simply a misunderstanding that I could have tried to blow into something really enormous, and it would have just made tension far worse. Now, they've got a beautiful yard. Quite often, be over there sitting at the table having coffee or a drink with them and talk, and it's very nice. But you go from one now. And of course, in a small town, now everybody knows who we are. So, now people will drive by in the cars, will slow down, they'll honk, and they'll wave. Don't even know who they are. Of course, the dogs do help as well, because I'm known as the dog guy.
Yes, that's a really wonderful thing you're doing, starting a dog rescue. So in your book, when you talk about conflict, let's just give the definition of really understanding conflict.
Well, the first thing, conflict, of course, is any kind of a disagreement that escalates beyond let's agree to disagree. And of course, pretty much everything today, it's beyond that. It's also considered, from what I've heard, insulting to say to somebody, well, let's agree to disagree.
I was not aware that was not acceptable anymore.
Yeah. You're supposed to see someone else's point of view, period. And that is problematic, of course. The other thing to realize in today's world, and probably always, all conflict and the resolution of conflict is underlined by violence. And to deny that is to deny the conflict itself. The threat of something is what gets people to come to the table and talk to you. And kind of have to accept that. Any situation can go south if you are not aware that that can happen. It doesn't mean you need to be paranoid. Men know this very, very well, whether they admit it or not, because it's more likely to turn violent if it's men. That could be changing in modern times. I don't really know. But, every argument I ever had with anybody at work, there was always that possibility that this could turn ugly. It didn't, but it's possible that it can. So conflict is essentially any disagreement that has the potential to increase in seriousness.
So I know in your book you go into great detail about interpersonal conflict, group conflict. I mean, you really dig very deep into the differences of the intensity, duration, outcomes, nature of the interaction. So give our audience, so again, remember we have tons of lawyers, we have CPAs, they're always dealing with conflict. Martial artists are, uh, you know, I think their world, like you are, is always looking for a different solution before getting into anything physical. But let's just get into like how does cognitive dissonance play a role in conflict in today's divided world?
That cognitive dissonance is, in my view, the most dangerous thing we face in conflict today. I'll tell a little story within this because it's interesting. The first time I ever saw cognitive dissonance and realized what it was actually an episode of MASH in which Hawkeye started to sneeze uncontrollably, and they brought a psychiatrist in to talk to him. And as a child, he had a cousin who was his best friend. He loved this boy, a little bit older than him, the hero worship the kids can have and all of this. And while fishing with this boy, the kid pushed him into the water, and then he almost drowned, and the kid pulled him out and then berated him as being stupid for falling in the water, even though he pushed him in. So in his mind, he loved this boy, but he also hated him. And of course, that's holding two conflicting viewpoints. Now, in the show, when it explodes, he explodes into this violent emotional state as this burns off. And I was watching this, and it was brilliantly acted. Of course, Alan Alda is a brilliant actor. And I thought, that is very much the powder keg we're living in, especially today as people are starting to realize just how badly they've been lied to in the world. And you believe a certain thing, and then suddenly you're completely wrong. You maybe look a little bit foolish for believing it, and that can manifest itself in a lot of aggression. And it's something I think that people need to be aware of, because that can happen anywhere. It can happen in the workplace. It can happen it's happened in courtrooms. The last place where you expect somebody to explode and go crazy. So it's something to always have, again, in the back of your mind as to what is driving this conflict that we have right now. Am I standing in an ideological opposition to this person? Or is there something else that's going on? And you have to develop the skill of starting to be able to read people, their expressions, their body postures, things like that, so that you know if something is aggressive or not. And then there are things you can do to de-escalate things very quickly when it comes to that point, such as speech. I mean, speech is very powerful, and it's becoming a lost art. Instead, attack is the new way of doing things.
You mean
where you have to
you mean verbal attacking?
Yes. Yeah.
Let's just talk about an average, business owner. They suddenly are dealing with this irate customer or client, the person's going a little overboard, and you're trying to calm them down. What would be some of the techniques or verbal cues and things that people could use to do that?
Well, the first thing that I would do myself is, what do I know about this person? Because if it's a client, obviously there are things that you know about the client. If it's in a retail setting, it's a little bit harder. And what type of personality is this person? And it's funny because I the first place I go to is to make sure I shut up and hear what they're saying. And it goes back to Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Listen to what they're saying and then make sure they understand that you understand. I have been in instances myself in which the person just simply does not feel they are being heard. And they are sure that you don't care about what this problem is that they have. Like my neighbor, as an example, thought I just didn't care that people were coming in the yard. I didn't know people were coming in the yard. And so once you understand what they're saying, the best way to disarm them is to tell them back, okay, let me see if I understand. Are you telling me this? With no judgment whatsoever within it. Because if you start off, well, I disagree with you, you've just made it adversarial. So you tell me what the problem is, and I tell you back what the problem is. And it doesn't matter whether you are dealing with a man, a woman, a senior, or a teenager. Everybody likes to be heard. And once they think they're being heard, the attitude does change. And I would say that that is the top escalation, de-escalation point, is that even when it's violent potential on the street, that the person wants to be heard. I had an instance years ago with a gang in Windsor, Ontario, which was no problem afterwards because I approached one of the people and talked to them, and then he quieted the rest of them down. And this was in a martial arts setting, so I was kind of like, I'm wearing a uniform and I'm kind of like, I got 10 kids around me. And I had to de-escalate this quickly because if it got bad, I'm not going to win this. And so I de-escalated very, very quickly and never had a problem with them again. So that's the basis of it all.
So I know in the past when I've done a little bit of conflict resolution education, I have personally learned to say things like, I hear you. But to understand you better, would you mind repeating back to me, just like you said, and trying to get them to talk? I also find that sometimes people encroach on my physical territory, and that I'm very careful, to give them plenty of space, back up a little bit if necessary. Not to get too excited, frailing my arms around or raising my voice or, saying anything that's adding more conflict to the conversation. Sometimes I've learned to say things like, I'm sure we can work this out. It's just a matter of us understanding each other, and shaking my head in a nodding situation. Um, what other suggestions would you have once things are starting to ramp up?
From a physical standpoint, you never ever stand directly in front of them squared off. So you're never going to be this way because everything is energy.
Right.
And they are bombarding you with this negative anger, and it is coming back to them. Now, there's an interesting experiment that you can do when you meet somebody and you shake their hand. It's turned to a 45-degree angle as you're shaking their hand, so that you are kind of, I don't know if you can see that on the screen properly, but the energy slides past you. And you will find as you're shaking this person's hand, if they have any aggressiveness in their body, they will try to reposition to be directly in front of you because they don't like this angle in which you are standing at, because they are unable to dominate, because domination will come straight on. In those types of situations, there must be eye contact, but it also cannot appear to be aggressive eye contact. If you're angry, that will be seen in your eyes, and you have to, take a deep breath and let that go and just flow with it. Also, hand position is important. It is normal for people when they are upset to clench their fists, right? You have to get out of that idea. Everything I teach on a martial arts floor is open-handed. If you're going to hit with a closed hand, you close the hand before you hit. You don't stay open. Also, keeping the hands downward, which does not, contrary to popular belief in the world, does not preclude you from being able to block a strike, because they can't see the hands coming back up. But hands can be viewed as aggressive as well. And so the body in as calm and natural position as possible. If you're standing and talking to a friend in a mall, your weight will go on one side of your body or the other. Your weight will go on one hip. If you're in conflict, it tends to be both feet. The weight is more evenly distributed. So if you can be conscious of that and shift the weight to one side as you're talking to a person, that automatically becomes friendlier. And the subconscious picks up on these things because the subconscious does know it. And that can help to calm the situation down as well. If you know the person's name, use the name. People love to hear their names. In as respectful a manner, of course, as is possible. And more deeply along the path of doing this sort of thing, learn to read what type of person you are dealing with, because everybody has a type. And if you are dealing with someone who would be called a director, like my oldest son is very much a director, you have to let him believe that he is in control of what is happening, whether he actually is or not. And then, on the opposite scale, I don't know what you would call, this comes from the Platinum Rule, and I know you know the author of that program. Of the 4 types, there is one type that I can't remember what he called it, but basically the person is very empathic. And that person you treat differently. And you learn to work with the different types of people, because, and I think it is absolutely brilliant, treat people how they want to be treated rather than how you want to be treated, because what I want out of it is irrelevant. Whatever I want is typically irrelevant to the person I'm in conflict with. It's what they want that matters. So that understanding of what it is they actually want and what type of person they are will give you the tools to be able to approach the conflict differently.
What about tonality, the raising of the voice and the cursing that sometimes develops during conflict?
None of it's good.
No, on no one's part. Yes.
Cursing has become part of the Western culture's vocabulary. It has become accepted, and I'm guilty of it. But a better off in a conflict without it, because one, you don't want to be viewed as being disrespectful. You can be assertive, but yelling, things like that will typically escalate a situation. You want to project confidence without the arrogance that can come with bad language and yelling, because that's the bad language and yelling thing is sort of like that game that people would play with the baseball bat where they're climbing it and whoever gets to the top of the baseball bat wins.
Yes.
The conflict turns into something like that when that happens. And if they're yelling at you, don't tell them to calm down.
Right.
That's all kinds of a bad idea. Just listen. Because, well, in a martial arts seminar once, a long time ago, there was a Chicago police officer teaching gun disarms. And as he put the gun, this mock gun he had, to this guy's head, he asked him an important question. Why aren't you dead? And of course, this guy didn't have an answer. And the answer is because I haven't decided to kill you yet. So when somebody is yelling at you and talking, they're still yelling at you and talking. It's when the talking stops that you're looking at reaching an impasse. So if they need to go off, let them go off. And then you can round it back up from there and say, well, listen, could we look at it from this point of view? Is that possible? And then you can start to get a response from them that you can work with. But if you join in on that, as hard as it is, it will escalate from there.
I have heard, I'm not very capable of it most of the time, but I have heard that if people are escalating in their voice and raising their voice, that you should actually lower your voice. Not necessarily whisper, but really slow down and lower your voice to model to them. What do you think of that?
Very much. That is exactly. And it's slow talking is always good. People do talk way too fast, just out of habit. And it's lowering of the voice is like a frequency lowering. Because the calmer you are, the more bass-like your voice becomes. Whereas if you're upset, it gets kind of squeaky. And of course, that's based on wherever your voice lies to begin with. I mean, I have a very powerful voice. When I yell, the world hears it. But I needed that voice to be on the floor teaching a group of, you got 40 kids in a classroom, you have to be heard. So I developed a very powerful voice, but I don't want to use that at all in any kind of resolution. Because even if I win the conflict, have I won anything?
That's a very powerful question because ego runs people and a lot of people in the world today. And I've actually heard people say, I'm arguing with someone and I don't even really disagree with them, but it's just I dug myself such a deep hole of arguing about something that, I sort of have to keep going because the ego has taken over. How do you calm someone's ego down?
By making sure they know they're understood. Because that's what the ego is. People have developed an internal desire today, and I blame social media, to be right all the time. Because the social media was set up in such a way to trigger emotions. And once you trigger emotions, then you're treading on the ego. You made me angry. You made me sad. You made me this. And if the person believes that they are being heard, then the ego does calm down. And also if they are incorrect in their view, if they've been heard, they do save face. If you do it with kindness, and if you can allow somebody to save face in their argument, you'll get a better response because you can work to it and go, I never thought of that. And once you get that type of a response of, well, I hadn't thought of that idea, you might have something there. Then you've developed that common ground in which you can work. I've had teaching martial arts is special because you're always dealing with egos with the instructors. they have accomplished a certain amount, but it's not enough to realize that it doesn't actually matter. Because eventually on the journey, you get to the point where it doesn't matter. And you will get, I have watched conflicts on the dojo floor between instructors based on, no, it's this move, not that move. And they will get quite angry about it. But because the egos flare up so much, nobody will come to me and say, which is it? They're too busy wanting to push back against each other and be right. Now, these arguments on the dojo floor, of course, do not escalate or become loud. But when you see them, you go over and you address that, obviously, because hard feelings can develop from these disputes. And I had one lady who was an instructor, fantastic girl, terrific martial artist, but sometimes she had the memory of a sieve. But she would always be sure she was right. And she would even, I can't think of the word. I mean, she would even almost attack me based on the fact that, no, you taught me this. Because she didn't see things exactly correctly. And I got to be very good with dealing with her. She was fantastic to have around because the kids loved her. But the ego would play. So whenever, to make her happy, I always made sure I listened to her explanation. I said, well, you know what? I might have messed up. I screw it up too. This is what it is. Oh, okay, sir. Right? I don't have to be right. I can say, hey, I messed up. But this is what the movement is. And we would maintain peace on the floor from that. Because staff, as you well know, they can be very challenging because they have their own ideas, they have their own points of view on things, and you got to deal with it all.
So in chapter 3 of your book, it's titled Improve Your Language and Communications. And you actually said the educational system in the West is a travesty. Students come out of college unable to do basic math, write a cursive, or even sign their names. Many people print their names. They're brainwashed by ridiculous social programs and ideas that have always been a failure. Anyway, you're very descriptive about that. One of the things that I've noticed is that when someone's losing an argument, often, I don't know if it's their ego or whatever it is, but they'll actually accuse you of being a racist or accuse you of something. And this is where things really start to fall apart. If I had to blame someone, I would blame mainstream media for their modeling of all of this, for lack of better terms, sometimes hatred of another person because they have a different point of view instead of, like actually listening to that point of view. And some of these people on the news, actually are almost foaming at the mouth because they cannot tolerate a different perspective than the agenda that they are sharing.
Uh, it's become a very complicated issue. And oddly enough, it's one I don't face here at all. It is a Western culture issue. And while the Western culture does exist in Romania, it is an Eastern European culture that's very, very different. So you don't get that you don't like me because I am such and such.
Yeah, as I'm looking at your book, the golden rule or the silver rule, it's very funny. Do unto others as you would have them do to you. So that is in your book. Of course, it's very ethical. You're a very ethical person. I've known you a long time. I do my best to be a very ethical person. And I, I have found that, there are certain people who can push your buttons and trigger you or catch you on an off day, or, you haven't behaved in a way that you're proud of. And I always ask myself, what do I need to learn here? How do I need to do this different in the future? Have more patience, listen to them more. Um, I, there's many techniques that we can use, but the main thing is how are you regulating yourself, right?
Exactly. How are you presenting yourself also in the world, just generally? Um, are you walking through life confident, or are you walking through life arrogant? And confidence, of course, is a great thing. It can keep you safe on the street, but that can very easily turn into arrogance. And of course, when it comes to conflict, people have to learn to pay attention more. So, in other words, put the phone away. And because there's nothing worse than talking to somebody and they pull their phone out.
Exactly. Yes.
They got a Facebook notification. And that kind of a skill can cause a conflict all by itself, because now the person doesn't feel heard because you had to check your phone.
Right. So, I recently interviewed a very brilliant health person, and he was telling me that we'll only speak about the United States right now, but that about more than 25% of people in the United States have some mental illness or drug addiction or something that has uh, sort of messed up the wiring in their brain and their personality. And that was a very good conversation for me to hear. In fact, he joked, he said it was actually higher than 25%. So his his comment that I am really remembering these days is asking myself, if I get into a situation where I do feel conflict, I ask myself this question: to what degree is this person have all their mental faculties? Are all the marbles rolling down the same aisle kind of thing? And that if I detect that there is some mental challenges, what is my, you know, process of going forward? Most of the time, my process is to end the connection as soon as possible in the most graceful way possible, not to engage with people who really aren't operating in the same realm mentally that I would operate in, or with grace or dignity or integrity. When people are having mental challenges. They do have outbursts. They, act very erratic, and they're not dependable. So it's almost dangerous sometimes to engage with these people. Is that your view of life?
It can definitely be a problem. Um, however, uh, uh, if you may have to engage, because sometimes to walk away will enrage. I'll give you an example of something I went through here back, I think it was in 2018. I don't drive because of my vision issue. Right? Being that I cannot judge depth, I took myself off the road because to me, I'm an accident waiting to happen. So I was living out in the country, and I needed to go into Brasov, so I had to take a bus to go in, and the bus had to stop abruptly. And as I moved with the bus, I stepped on this guy's foot. Right. And I saw the rage come up in this man instantly. So immediately I just, because rage, when rage comes up, that is mental illness, right? You've gone off into an area that is dangerous. First thing I did was I looked at him and I said, Imparero damno, which is, I'm very sorry, sir. And I touched his arm. And immediately you could see the collapse in his eyes. And he's like, no problem. And then he walked over and stood somewhere else because he really didn't want to be near me. But I felt at that point in time, I was about to get popped because he was so enraged by it. But the thing that we don't think about in these conflicts is in the mental illness examples, what else is going on in this person's mind right now? Is there something else that drove his reaction to me? I won't know what it is, but it is from a smart standpoint to think that I don't know what's going on. And maybe the best thing I can do is to be humble in it. As you know, I work very strange hours. I'm up all night. And I will take the dogs out for a walk in the city at night. Now, Romania is a very safe country. However, that doesn't mean you're reckless. Quite often, I would go through in front of one of the big churches in the city or a lot of park benches, and there will oftentimes be groups of young people. I would say kids, but I'm old and they all look like kids to me anyway, right? And I'm walking through with the dogs. I'm walking through them with the dogs. First thing I do is the first person who I see who looks at me, I address them and say hello in as friendly a manner as I can. And I always get that back. Always. And quite often I end up there longer than I want to because this is always male and female and the girls want to pet the dogs. But it's an automatic disarm with people. Plus, I will also state the fact the dogs are not aggressive, so you don't have to worry about them. And that kind of communication can change a lot of things, even with somebody who has problems.
Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about, by the way, the book that you were talking about earlier, The Platinum Rule, was Tony Alexandra. And you talked about the Platinum Rule in your book a little bit with some of the different rules about basic business personalities and things like that. And it is a very good book, and we would definitely recommend not only your book for everybody, but that book also. Um, One of my mentors many years ago asked me, I was telling her about some conflict, and she said, well, what kind of mischief were you up to that caused this conflict? And I laughed, and when I first said, "Oh, no mischief," but then later I realized, "Oh yeah, lots of mischief." Sometimes we might be in a mood, and we might say something sarcastic or demeaning or challenging to people that causes conflict. That you realize later, maybe looking at it, that I kind of started that. So I always, tell people that I work with, pay attention to the kinds of conflicts that you have, when you have those conflicts, and how much are you responsible for the conflict. So, any thoughts about that?
And also, I can remember the words of my father is we don't discuss religion or politics. And today, of course, politics is something that everybody is almost programmed to discuss because you can't get away from it. You go on YouTube, that's all you see. I've started conflict on purpose. For almost 20 years, I was starting conflict on purpose. I'm not exactly proud of that anymore, but I was at that point. I think that, and again, depending on the topic, being very lighthearted can help because if you're lighthearted, people realize you're just trying to be funny or laughing at something. But definitely not make sure they don't think you're laughing at them, because that will really give you a problem very, very quickly. My guard is very much down here because we can talk about religion and politics without it getting angry. They're welcome discussions here. And that makes for it's interesting too. It makes for a very peaceful place, but you also don't need to talk about it if it's not forbidden. It's funny how the brain works.
Yes. So I recently had a conversation and with someone who was talking about conflict, and they said, I think a lot of conflict has happened on Earth because we're not educated in talking about religion and politics. That if we were educated as a young child to accept other people's views of life, and that whatever religion or whatever politics they had was perfectly fine, they have the right to have that. Maybe there wouldn't be so much conflict in today's world. I certainly don't have a clear answer on that. I know I grew up with the same advice. And when I became a professional speaker, that was one of the first pieces of advice I got from my mentor. It's like, just avoid religion, avoid politics, avoid anything that's going to cause conflict in your presentation. And so I think we can all find a common ground that the more understanding we are and accepting that people have a right to their own opinions, whether we like it or not, I think our harmony would improve dramatically. So we're close to our hour now. So what little information would you like to leave with people, that they could remember the next time they're sort of faced with a conflict, which will be sooner than you think, probably. Some kind of conflict, whether it's in a holiday situation or a business situation or a personal situation or neighbors or things like that. The thing to have in your mind, because mindset really is the cue, the remedy, so to speak, your mindset of, I'm willing to listen. I don't have to be right, and this other person has no power over me. I'm in control of myself. And people who lose their tempers are actually showing how weak they are. So, what are your sort of parting advice?
Strong men have control of themselves. Weak men do not. They're tied to their emotions. But I think, and I cannot remember which self-help guru said it. It might have been Wayne Dyer. I'm not sure, but the expression is better to be kind than to be right.
I think that was Wayne Dyer.
And I think that is absolutely brilliant, because why somebody viewing what I think as being wrong has nothing to do with me. They can hold whatever opinion they wish. It's their right to hold their opinion. People, I'm worried about what somebody thinks of me. Well, you'd be surprised how little they think about you. And also, it isn't my business what somebody thinks of me. It's their business. And if we can keep that, it helps to keep the ego under control. That to me is the big one, is be kind. It goes back to a book I would always suggest anybody to read, which was Dan Millman's Way of the Peaceful Warrior.
Yeah, great book.
And I never heard of his book. And I had written a book on self-defense, and I named it that. And he called me and asked me if I would consider changing the name because it was causing confusion.
Nice.
And I was like, sure, no problem, because I was giving this away at self-defense workshops. But the internet, of course, it caught Google's eye. So I changed the name of the book, and he sent me I was shocked I didn't know about his book. He sent me an autographed copy, which I wish I could find today. I have no idea whatever happened to it. Somebody read it and didn't bring it back. But you know, the lessons in that book are just phenomenal. And I kind of view the world as being walking through the world as just being conflict resolution. You know, whether or not you're crossing and that car is going to stop, why do you have to curse the driver out if he doesn't stop?
Or
Is it
shoot him
really
the
necessary?
bird. Or shoot him the bird.
Yeah. Actually, I got punched in the face once for doing that when I was 17. That was a lesson. I was trapped in the car. I couldn't do anything about it. He came over and wham, right in the face. And I talked him down because this guy was just gone. And I always remember going to see my very wise father about it. He said, he could have shot you too. That was a stupid thing to do.
Yes. So, sort of to put a bow on this, I think that all of us have to take literally 100% responsibility, not to be reactive. We want to be proactive, but not reactive. It is much better to leave things unsaid, than it is to completely burn bridges because you never ever know when you're going to need that connection. That's been a hard lesson, I think, for all of us, not to burn bridges occasionally. It just feels right at the time. But if all of us would look back in our history and think about people we had been friendly with and then sort of became enemies, and then, something happened again that sort of shifted us, and now we were okay again. Um, you know, really life is about, what we're contributing to it is going to be mirrored completely back. So in our mindset, if we're mad all the time, if we're ticked off at the world because we've been, wound up by the mainstream media, or somebody in our life is telling us all this bad stuff, and you go out into the world. I remember going into the world wanting to pick sort of verbal fights at times in my life because I was so angry about my own life. And I remember when my husband got killed many years ago, I was just angry. I was completely angry for a year. And I would be in great delight to argue with you about anything because I was so angry about him being murdered. And so I often ask myself when I see people misbehave, because Art, I used to do public seminars for 6 years, and you get quite the flavors of life in public seminars that you know, there's a lot of wounded people in life that are not strong and they can't control themselves, and somebody has to be the adult in the room.
Yes.
And we're going to be the adult. And as business owners and entrepreneurs, it really does pay for us not to burn bridges, not to say things that are insane or insensitive, to actually just be the wise person, to be in the wise woman, wise man section of life. So I want to thank you profoundly. Tell everybody how they can find you. I know you're in Romania, so it's not so easy to call you, but you must have an email address that we could use.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
It is master at kyushojitsu.ro. It's best to have that printed someplace.
I'm going to put that in. By the way, we're going to take 4 sections of Art's book, and we're going to make 4 reports that will be in on the membership site. The transcript of this will be on the membership site. I'll make sure that they can find you. And really want to thank you for the contribution you're doing in the world. I'm a big fan of martial arts people. I think all children literally should be in martial arts training. It would give them training that the educational system doesn't have time, energy, or knowledge to do. And every child I've ever known personally that has been in martial arts training is a polite, primarily kind, uh, a critical thinker, because martial arts really does give you critical thinking. So I want to thank you profoundly, Art, for your time. I
Thank you
know
very much.
it's probably in the middle of the night for you. So we're going to leave everybody with the thought about as you do your life, really think about how present you are in your own life so that you're not bringing upon you unnecessary conflict.
I do have one final suggestion for people
Okay.
that I practice here. Because I shop every day because I can, which I love, fresh stuff every day. Um, Whenever I pass someone on the street, I always say good morning. And the smiles and the response is remarkable. And so that's proactively taking care of conflict.
Absolutely. And I real quick will tell this story. This is a very famous story from Richard Gere, an actor who was doing his first movie in New York many years ago. And everybody warned him, oh, the people in New York are so rude and so difficult and so horrible. And he said when he got there, he was there for 2 weeks, uh, that he did the same thing. He smiled at people and he said that he found the New Yorkers, because he was in a positive mood, they reflected that back to him, that they were the nicest, kindest, helpful people. And he was shocked that they had such a reputation. So we do experience the world mirroring our inner thoughts. So if we're in a bad mood, that is going to reflect in the world. We will, like attracts like, we're going to attract bad to ourselves. So when I go out in the world, I'm like, I just want to be happy and send good vibes, to people. And so I travel a lot. People always help me. Um, I don't run into those difficult people very often because I'm projecting good into the world. All right, well, folks, I want to remind everybody when you go to our membership site, we have the most wonderful different coaches that you might want to remember. We have faculty coaches on PR, product management, leadership, uh, all kinds of fabulous things that is written every month just for our membership site. So please do visit it. And we're going to call it a wrap. And we will talk to you next month. Thank you so much.
Thank you.